Hello and welcome. This is Fireball.
Is that Rathi?
This is Mia.
We are going to do a video on COVID-19 impact on the Indian economy. What we're going to cover is look at the impact of COVID-19 on global economy, then look at the Indian economic performance over the last few years, look at the current situation, where we are going, and then in-depth analysis of 21 sectors of the economy. Looking at global economy, what we notice clearly is that almost all of the 10 largest economies looking at a a drop in their GDP growth rates, 2.9, 2.3% for the US and so on, except for Japan and UK, who have been revised upwards. This is true for India as well, from 6.5 to 5.3 and then further lower for 2020 to reduce the instances of infections and that to control the pandemic that is going on. Social distancing norms are being used, but then that has led to a production shock. Even when people are working from home, production cannot be completed without social distancing or lockdowns going on in so many countries. So that is the twin supply as well as demand shock. Going ahead, looking at Indian GDP, it has been steadily in decline since March 2018 from 7.7 to 4.7 in December 2019. For March quarter, it is expected to be 3.5% only, and for June quarter, less than 2% is the expectation. That is, if lockdown does not exceed 30th of April, which most likely it is going to be, right?
Yes, I agree.
Then looking at stock indices impact, Sensex used to be somewhere around 40,000 early January or late December, but on 28th February it had come down to 38,000. That was primarily because of Chinese supply shock, while most countries had stock to last for a couple of months, and WHO as well as the Chinese government assured everyone that production would resume, but then now we know that it is not the case. Even the fall in oil prices, which is mostly because of fall in demand as well as disagreements between OECD as well as Russia. But then again, that does not cheer anyone because we're not consuming oil as much as we were used to, right? We can see from the table that from 38,000 Sensex fell to 25,000 in March, which is a drop of 32%. Similar fall in Nifty as well.
Looking at this current fall of Sensex of 32%, this has been the fastest dip of Sensex, even when compared to the dot-com burst, the 2008 crisis, or even the Harshad Mehta scam. The falls there were gradual and they extended over several months. And now we move on to the sector analysis.
The various sectors have already started to feel the impact of the nationwide lockdown brought into place on 25th of March in India. The outbreak has presented fresh challenges for the economy, causing disturbing impact on both demand and supply side. Starting with the agriculture and food processing industry. If we look at the Indian agriculture industry, it is facing a lot of trouble with laborers and a lot of trouble in terms of movement of goods as well. Just a few months back, agriculture suffered due to uneven monsoon, and now again the sector is facing the impact of coronavirus. The floriculture business is completely shut down. Flowers are thrown away as waste because obviously there is no demand, as there are no weddings or parties and no one is going to the temple to offer the flowers. And if we look at the poultry business, where India has created a foothold at the global level, is facing a loss of around 150 to 200 crore each day. This can be connected to the false claim of the WhatsApp forwards that has been going around in the country claiming that the virus can spread via chicken. The prices of commodities like maize, chana dal, they all have fallen down. The procurement centers, if they shut down completely, the farmers will not be able to sell their crop at the right price.
Well,
If we look
misinformation is a real problem. People in US stopped eating Chinese food because they thought Chinese food will give them COVID-19.
exactly, so social media is already seeing such claims moving around, which is false.
Agriculture employs 60% or directly or indirectly 60% of the Indian population. So a slump in agriculture will have a huge impact on overall Indian GDP as well. Now moving on to aviation.
If we look at the aviation industry, it is perhaps facing the worst ever turbulence. All airlines had to cut their operations due to restrictions placed by the government, and of course, there was a huge slump in demand. COVID-19 crisis may put airlines into bankruptcy. Already, we are seeing that airlines globally can lose between 63 to 113 billion dollars. And the large airlines are talking about cutting salaries of the employees as high as 25%. That's what Indigo says they would be doing. Air India is working on a cost saving plan as of now. which will cut the salaries of the employees by 5% around. Go Air is already furloughing employees, terminating contracts of expat pilots, and similar steps are being taken by other airlines as well. The only thing that is coming in the way of the airlines collapsing even earlier is the low prices of crude oil right now. The
Yep.
situation is grim, but the sector might come out of this, but it will take a very long time.
But then what's the use of low oil prices if there's no revenue, there are no flights taking place, right? With so many planes getting grounded, 40% of Delta Airlines planes have been grounded in the US. I mean, we covered in our last video, if you remember, Rathi. We looked at
Yes,
Air New Zealand cutting 85% of their international traffic, losing revenue. So this is one of
exactly.
the worst hit sectors. In tourism industry, we are looking at a drop in outbound as well as inbound tourism. Well, simply because international travel is banned among most countries. We're looking at major international events such as World Tech events or Congress by Google and Facebook as well getting cancelled. Hotels across domestic as well as international bookings are looking at 90% cancellations. Even if hotels are giving up their rooms for isolation wards, it's still not a sufficient revenue for them, is it? I mean, the costs of then removing any virus strain is going to be huge as well. Travel sector has shrunk by 25% in 2020. That is the estimate of World Travel Tourism Council. We're also looking at a global loss of revenue of about 11 to 19%, and Indian industry is easily looking at 3.8 crore job losses, roughly 70% of total employment in tourism industry. Moving on with capital markets.
As we saw earlier, that the Sensex has collapsed by 32%, and but this is also true for the whole global economy. Also, the correlation with the market because of the falling markets are rising. Earlier, the gold used to be the safe zone, and as soon as the market equity markets dropped, the price of gold used to rise. But apart from a brief spike at the end of the February, the gold prices also declined. This is due to the increased correlation due to the stressful condition of the market. Also, the foreign institutional investors withdrew money from the market, accounting to a net outflow of around 25,938
Crores.
crores between 1st January and 18th March, and hence, and also the impact of household investments and wealth are falling in general as the cash is the king now. Moving on.
Because of this lockdown, the demand in the e-commerce sector has surely risen. But then e-commerce will eventually see a dip in growth as they are actually facing a lot of challenges right now. There is increased pressure on the supply chain for delivery of products. Also, they need to equip their employees with appropriate resources in order to manage the operations remotely. There are backlog of orders. They also have shortage of workers at the moment. Now, delivery are getting delayed because of restrictions on manufacturing, the movement of goods, and obviously social distancing. E-commerce companies continue to service orders for essentials, but the delivery timelines are getting stretched every day. At the same time, there is a surge in demand for home deliveries. The government also have to ensure that they do not put on a lot of restrictions on the movement and operations of the e-commerce companies. And the companies themselves have to look up for new distribution channels which focus on direct to consumer route.
Just yesterday, I was reading a news. Some woman in Charlotte, USA, had not left her home for 3 weeks, and still she was tested positive because one package she had received 2 weeks ago, and that driver had tested positive later on. So, while people are switching to deliveries, the risk of infections will rise. There has to be a balance between how containment has to be enforced as well as continued delivery, right? That's going to increase costs to say the least.
So
Exactly.
this will fall under the e-commerce companies. They will have to ensure that the delivery boys that they send out, they protect themselves and they have equipped themselves with the appropriate resources.
Right. People also have to take caution.
Yep.
Moving forward, education.
So the institutes in India are training more than 10 million trainees, and with this lockdown, this number would obviously decrease by around 10 to 15%. And also, this coupled with the sluggish human resource demand is likely to increase unemployment rate in the country, and due to this, the enrollment of marginal groups that will decrease substantially in the coming few months. If we look at the simulation-based and edutech players like Byju's and now the Zoom meetings as well, they have seen increased adoption by students and as well as educational institutes, so that if any such position comes in the future, they are better prepared for this. Entertainment, events, and sports. Obviously, due to the social distancing, people are not allowed to gather, and hence a lot of events are being cancelled. Also, the movie theaters are also shut down. The losses because of these are around 200 to 250 crores.
per day, right?
Yep. And also, many new movie releases are being delayed, and around 10 million jobs will be impacted directly, and their livelihood is at risk as all major national events are postponed or cancelled due to the COVID-19 pandemic.
That reminds me of poor Scarlett Johansson. She gets her first MCU movie and then coronavirus.
Exactly. Her film was quite awaited as well in the fan base. Yes, now coming to this sector, the Moody's rating on Thursday, that is 2nd April 2020, revised the rating of Indian banking system to negative from stable, citing the decrease in asset quality. Also, the savings may increase in short term, which can help cushion the liquidity demand for banks. The potential risk of defaults and insolvency, however, is on the rise unless and until a regulatory framework is tweaked to help them out a bit, as we have seen in the airline sector and other stressed sectors. The retail financing industry, which was one of the key drivers of growth, will be impacted for at least 2 quarters as demand for housing assets, consumer goods, and working capital financing will get hit. Coming to the next sector of private security services.
The main problem with security services is that while it is not a huge economic activity, it does employ over 85 lakh people, and we could see many of these being classified as non-essential, and that leads to just that many people being unemployed. That is a slump in economic activity. So many people, I mean, these security guards, most of them are low wage earners, 12, 15,000 a month or even less. And so if they lose their source of income, financial problems they're going to face in their own household, these are going to be similar to what agricultural laborers and others are facing. Moving forward to real estate and construction, this is one of those industries that is getting hit as large as probably aviation. Real estate is already been on a decline from last year. The demand has been slowing down, commercial as well as household. It is a huge sector which has a huge employment, and it has a multiplier effect on 250 allied industries. This is second only after automobile industry. They contribute roughly 13% of GDP, and if we look at 30% job loss in this sector alone and their allied sectors, it's going to be a huge disaster. FIIs have been pulling out from the economy, from markets. FDIs in commercial segment was one of the last saving graces of real estate, but then that also is now on hold or slowing down because there won't be as much leasing activity as was expected. Similarly, US and Europe are facing less cash flows and their own cash withdrawals for their medical bills and insurance. There's not going to be a lot of investment from that source either. There's also a lot of postponement of REITs. Many more were scheduled to begin from 2020, but then that's not going to happen, or at least going to be delayed. We can also look at fresh equity investment, but then that also is now expected to be late. So in general, we can look at a lot of cash flow problems. Moving on to retail.
As we look into the retail sector, ever since the lockdown was imposed, more than 95% of non food retailers have closed their outlets and are looking at practically no revenues during this period. And they expect to earn only about 40% of last year's revenue in the next coming 6 months. Obviously, the malls are shut down and businesses have closed down temporarily, but the impact is going to last for a longer time than this. Retail companies are adopting preventive actions for the safety of their employees and customers. Now, they have also started furloughing of employees. Around 80,000 jobs are expected to be cut by various retailers. For essential items, There are again challenges like availability of affordable prices, ensuring home delivery in order to avoid the panic.
Moving on to transport and logistics.
As we can see, coronavirus has affected both the supply as well as demand. Now, reduced demand for logistics due to reduced production has led to downward pressure on prices across the subsectors like warehousing, freight transportation. As we know, the public transport, buses, metros, and railways have reduced in frequencies or they are completely shut down in some areas, which has led to the impact on revenues as well as operations. Now, the daily wage workers in this industry are adversely impacted.
Moving on to automobile.
Before the COVID-19 virus hit the global economy, there was already a slump in the Indian automobile sector, and the experts say that slump will continue for quite a while. Also, the aftermarket accessory market will be hit quite badly with it, since the spending of consumer on discretionary items will be put off due to increase in spending in essential items like foods and medicines, etc. Although we saw in China that there was a possibility of V-shaped recovery in the automobile sector, but the experts say again that a chance of V-shaped recovery is not likely. Instead, there may be a U-shaped recovery. The demand for passenger vehicles, both two and four-wheeler segment and commercial vehicle, is expected to further plummet. Also, the liquidity and cash crunch has already put a dent in sales of fleet operators like Uber and Ola. Now we move on to the consumer
Durables and
durables
electronics.
and electronics sector. In this sector, we expect about a 40% fall in the volume demand during the first quarter of fiscal 2021, and the consumer durables demand to decline by around 14 to 16% in the fiscal 2021. Previously, we have observed that about 40% of air conditioner companies' annual sales can come from a month alone. So there is still hope that we can start to recover.
Yeah,
The
but then
anticipated price of these durable items will see a price increase in the range of 3 to 5%.
But
Yes,
then
fine.
all durables are not ACs, right? I mean, TVs and washing machines, they don't have cyclical demand. While some companies may find respite, we definitely see a dim fall in sales and revenues for most durables products and their companies, right?
Exactly.
Moving on to medical devices and pharmaceuticals. Across India, manufacturers are finding it difficult to source raw materials. That's because most of it comes from China. We import roughly 85% of all APIs, which is active pharmaceutical ingredients, and 67% of bulk drugs and drug intermediaries, which come from China and then are converted to finished products in India. But then, with the supply shock, all that has been derailed. Then the Drug Regulatory Authority has reported that they're very low on 57 important APIs. Again, that impacts not just COVID fight, but then in general, a lot of people will struggle to get normal medicines if this continues for a longer time. Looking at the price side, we expect at least 40% price hike for most antibiotics. Penicillin G is already become 58 to 60% more expensive than pharmaceutical manufacturing, which is currently exempted, but then labor shortages are definitely going to be there. Again, similar problems faced by other industries as well, other sectors as well. Then we look at diplomatic pressures. For example, just recently, US had forced India to resume exports of certain chemicals which India had banned due to its use in fighting COVID-19. Similarly, Tamil Nadu Chief Minister had reported that 50,000 to 100,000 test kits for coronavirus, which were supposed to come to India, have actually been sent to US instead by Chinese companies. Either way, there's a lot of problems going on with pharmaceuticals, and it's an uphill battle. Moving on to mobile phones.
Mobile phone market in India is quite a strong one, but given the epidemic of this virus, the experts suggest that it may take smartphone levels back to the levels that were last seen 4 years ago. China's economy is moving towards a normalcy as the outbreak is coming under control, and smartphone factories are increasing production while India is in the midst of a shutdown. This alone may cost the industry around rupees 15,000 crores.
Moving on, MSME is the backbone of any economy. Roughly 11.4 crore individuals are employed by all MSMEs in India, and most of them definitely would be deemed non-essential. This will have an adverse effect on livelihood of all these people. Business losses would incur, production slumps, and these are small factories employing 10 to 12 or even fewer. Some of them have more, but then these are very small industries and they don't actually have a lot of cash, working capital, or proprietors' capital to back up on. So they're going to have a lot of problems, even with the 3-month extended credit that RBI announced. It's still not enough and it probably won't be able to help them. All India Manufacturers Organization estimated that 25% of MSMEs will face closure if the lockout goes beyond 4 weeks. And guess what? It's going to be extended by at least 8 weeks. So we're looking at 43% closures among MSMEs, which is a huge economic mess for the next couple of years at least. Moving on to the next, power and renewable energy. Power is a sector which focuses on supply side. The coal production has not stopped, so there's no disruption on that end. But then demand has definitely fallen. Even in March, when the lockdown was not there, we were looking at 3.6% negative growth. And now with commercial and industrial activity, which contribute to 50% of total demand, actually being muted or at very reduced levels, we're looking at power generation companies facing huge problems such as recovery of cash delayed or even bankruptcy among their customers. The power generation capacity in India mostly is thermals and they have stocked up on coal, but then that is a resource that they have to pay for, right? Unlike hydro or renewables, which is a small portion India's power and utility sector. Going ahead towards publishing, paper and printing.
When we look at the paper and publishing sector, India imports raw materials such as pulp, etc., from China as well as many of the European countries. Now, since the borders are closed, there is a disruption of supply of raw materials to the paper mills. Now, newspaper industry is on a shaky ground. Online news traffic and viewing has been surging during this pandemic. Commercial printing has affected as many magazines have cancelled their printed issues and are making their digital versions available for free for the readers. Now, packaging possibly will not fall under huge losses as they come under essentials because they supply to FMCG and pharma companies. But the packaging industry will now have to turn to local sourcing of raw materials as they will not be able to import materials from outside the country. When we look at the textile industries, India imports around $460 million worth of synthetic yarn, $360 million worth of synthetic fabric, and also $140 million worth of accessories like buttons, zippers, hangers, etc. from China. Now, the alternative sourcing, since the borders are now closed and the production has also reduced in China, so they have to look for alternative sourcing, which may impact the quality as well as the cost of the finished goods might increase by 5 to 10% depending upon the source that the companies choose. India also exports 20 to 25 million kg of cotton yarn every month to China. The export now is impacted considerably. Even the price of cotton will be reduced now. Employment has been impacted owing to limited domestic and international demand because since the malls are shut down, the retail industry has shut down, and textile doesn't really fall under essentials, so no one is buying, and therefore the production has also come down.
That puts an end to our presentation and our discussion. Again, Fireball, Mia, and Izzat Rathi, if you have any comments to write them down.
Just one little thing
Sure.
that all the resources we used will be mentioned in the description below. And if you guys want to chat about it or ask anything, you have the comment section and you also have the Discord server. You can comment.
One more thing, I think we want to discuss about the rise in stock market from the lowest in March, right? It was mostly because of $2 trillion injection by US Treasury to fight COVID coronavirus, and then the RBI also cutting the repo rate and CRR to among the lowest that it has ever been in India. These were the factors that have improved, let's say, recovered the market to some extent, but then a lot of it still rests on uncertainty in what the future holds. Stay safe, guys. Right? Thank you for watching. Bye bye.